Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. Today we're going to be talking about paintbrushes and roller covers. We want to thank Hayward Carson. He's been sharing our podcast on his social platforms. The first modern-style paintbrush is credited to Meng Tian, who was a general who lived about 200 BC. And what he used was...
From where?
In China.
Oh.
So he used a bamboo handle, and he used rabbit fur for the bristles. And that was his paintbrush. The first paint rollers were invented by either Norman Brieke in Canada, or Richard Adams was developing it for Sherwin-Williams in 1940.
So this is like the roller covers?
So, yes, exactly. So there wasn't a roller cover, so people were using paintbrushes till 1940. There was no roller covers. Amazing, huh? And what's wild is there's some controversy in the hardware circles because, Norman was developing this, and he released it in 1940, but Richard Adams said that he had already created it and developed it, but it wasn't released until 1941 by Sherwin-Williams, and they called it the roller coater, and they spelled it Koater, so that's some hardware controversy.
And then, some spelling.
What's interesting about Sherwin-Williams is they developed the first ready-to-use paint in a resealable tin can. The first painters, they had to buy everything, so they would have to buy their own cans. And every day they had to make their own paint, so they would mix oil, and they would take these pigments that created the color. They had to grind them up, put them into the oil in this can, and continually stir it while they were painting. Otherwise, these pigments were so heavy, they would fall out of the solution.
This was not a good job to have.
Yeah, fascinating, huh?
Let's talk about paintbrushes.
So there's two types of bristle. You have natural and synthetic.
What's the difference?
Well, the natural, you're primarily using these for oil paint. What's wild is if you use natural bristles in latex paint or water-based paint, it absorbs that water, and then the bristles get all limp, and they lose their shape, so they get real floppy. And then for synthetic bristles, they're really good for water-based paints. A lot of the synthetic blends, you can use them for both latex and oil, so very versatile. In natural bristles, you have hog bristles. You have a black china bristle. This is a thick, strong, coarse hair, and it's really good for oils and epoxy. And what's interesting about the natural hog bristles is they have split ends, so split ends in your hair.
Right.
They have these naturally flared tips that grab onto the paint, and it releases it really nice. You also see white china bristle, and this is very fine, soft hair, and this is primarily used for stains and varnish and polyurethanes. Anything with a clear coat is really good for a white china bristle. This is going to give you a much smoother finish than a black china bristle. And then you'll see ox hair, which is very soft hair for a very fine finish, and this is your most expensive type of natural brush, and it's also going to give you the smoothest finish. Now for synthetic brushes, you have your choice of nylon, polyester, or a blend. The nylon is very long lasting, but if you're working a lot in high temperatures, it can actually kind of lose its shape, and they don't recommend nylon for shellac or lacquer. Polyester brushes are very stiff, but they can be used for water-based and oil-based paint. They're recommended for varnish, lacquer, and shellac. But probably the best paintbrush for the average homeowner is a nylon polyester blend. This is what we always recommend at our stores. It's going to work great on water-based paints, oil-based paints. They have a variety of different blends. So if you look at the packaging, it's going to tell you exactly what type of paint you can use it in and the type of finish.
Mm-hmm. So this is probably going to be labeled all paint on the front of it?
Exactly. Yeah, because some of them, it's interesting, some of the packaging. Some will tell you what the material is, and some will just tell you what the paint is and what type of finish you're looking for. Or the project. Sometimes they'll say, for cabinet work or fine work.
Mm-hmm. What about different styles of paintbrush?
So you've got angle or straight, the cut of it. So an angle is about a 14-degree angle. The bristles are cut to make it easy to get into narrow areas. Also makes it very easy for window parts. If you're cutting in around, let's say, a wall and a ceiling, it allows you to really get a nice straight line. So you're creating that band of paint so that then you can roll a roller cover into it. So you're using this primarily on projects where you need a thin line. For a flat or a straight cut brush, they're usually called trim or wall. And trim is usually narrow brushes for trim and corners, and then a wall brush is going to be a little wider for larger areas. So this is like wide wood trim, or big projects. If you have like a small shed or a fence, some furniture, if you want to paint downspouts, that's usually a place where you would use a wall brush.
So you're probably never going to see a 4-inch angle brush.
Right. Yeah. Angle brush is usually 1 to 2 inches.
Right.
In 1.5, 2, 2.5.
When you're choosing a paintbrush now, you have a lot of different styles of handles.
You have long, you have short. Some of the handles can either be thick or thin. It's pretty wild. So really the key is what...
Well, they're wood, plastic.
Yeah, we had, like, coming into our stores, we have a lot of professional painters that really like the wood handles. And they, a lot of them like the thin wood handle. I had one plastic handle brush that I had used for years while I was remodeling home.
Was it your favorite?
It was my favorite paintbrush of all time, and it had like
what happened to
it? I wish I knew. I think somebody stole it because it was so cool. But it had like a little rubber grip where my finger laid, and so it was just great. And then they have these new Shorty handles that a lot of people find easier to control because you get your whole hand and your palm down close to the bristles, so it's very easy to cut an edge. But it's really about taking a few minutes in the store and just trying it and kind of working it as if you would be painting a wall.
Right, because they don't all feel the same.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird that they're so different. And so just take the time to play with it a little bit, and the job will be much better if it's comfortable in your hands.
Well, especially with paintbrushes. I mean, this isn't something that's going to go quickly.
Yeah, if you're cutting in from the wall up into a ceiling and you're doing a lot of rooms in your home, you're going to be spending a lot of time with this in your hand, and it's nice to be comfortable.
And if you're spending a lot of money on a paintbrush, because
right, and you should.
There's a wide range of prices.
And get a quality brush. I can't tell you, when we first started investing in real estate and we tried to save every dollar, we bought so many cheap brushes, and over time they just flare out.
Right.
They don't keep a nice edge, so you're doing a bad job. The paint doesn't flow on, so there is
they leave bristles behind.
Yeah, and brush marks. So it is shocking the difference between a quality brush and a cheapie.
So you should find something that you're comfortable with, that you're going to take care of, because you're going to have it for a long time. Let's talk about the different sizes and what they're used for.
So 1 and 2 inch paintbrushes are great for cutting into walls, ceilings. You can use this for trim, windowsills. You're picking a size that matches what the project is. So on thin window trim, you'd probably want that 1 inch brush. Let's say you're painting chair rail on a wall, which is usually 1.5 to 2.5 inches wide. You're going to pick a brush that's just smaller than the size of the wood.
Why?
Well, it's going to give you more control, and you don't want to overlap the wood, especially if you're painting this on the wall. You don't want to touch the wall or get drips. A 3-inch brush you're probably going to use on large, flat areas, cabinets, doors, fences, and then a 4-inch brush if you're doing, let's say, painting a shed or
your house.
Right, or if you have siding that you're painting.
So you mentioned chair rail.
Okay.
What is it?
So it's wood trim that you have like in the center of your wall, going the whole length. It kind of breaks up the wall.
So like molding?
Molding. So it makes it look maybe more formal or more interesting. So people think that the original chair rail, like here in the U.S., was put up to keep chairs from marring the walls.
Wasn't it?
But in the 1700s in England, the Shakers started installing long lengths of wood on their walls, and they put pegs in it, and they would hang up their chairs on these pegs so that they could sweep the floor and mop the floor. And that's how kind of that became very popular. But you know who else liked chair rail?
Egyptians?
Were the ancient Romans and Greeks, and they used chair rail to kind of give the room different proportions. They would also paint below the chair rail one color and above it another color.
That's interesting.
So most experts say if you decide to put up chair rail, you should divide the wall 1/3 up to the ceiling. So let's say if you have an 8-foot ceiling, you would put your chair rail about 28 inches to 32 inches up from the floor. And then if you have taller ceilings than 8 feet, they say 30 inches is kind of a good guide where to put chair rail. It's the most pleasing effect.
So it's not like in the center of the wall?
No, about a third up.
Interesting. Let's talk about cleaning off your paintbrushes.
So now with these new modern paints that dry much quicker, you really need to clean your brushes immediately after you're done with them. And you don't want to soak them because you can damage the bristles.
What happens?
Well, you'll spread them out. They get, and I'll tell you from experience, I've destroyed a lot of brushes over the years.
So you mean like soaking them in a tub or?
Yeah, well, if you just put them into, we used to put them into, like we would get the big Slurpees, those plastic cups, and then we would fill those with water and we'd shove our brushes in that and just let them set overnight while we were working on some of these projects, and man, we just destroyed them. So when you're cutting, you just don't get a nice line anymore.
Right.
So you really need to keep the shape of those bristles. So what you want to do when you're done painting, you want to run it under warm water to get off most of the paint, and then you're going to start working the bristles gently with your fingers, and then use a little mild soap, work it in with your hand into the bristles. A couple of painters, they recommend using Goop, G-O-O-P, hand cleaner. They say that works very well. But then a nice tool, if you're going to be doing a lot of painting around the house and you buy a quality brush, you should really pick up a painter's comb. And so it has little solid bristles that are widely spaced, and just this simple tool will really clean anything that builds up on the bristles, and it actually it helps get water into the center of the brush,
right? Because
there's a little void there that helps hold.
Well, if you ever spread out the bristles under the water, the amount of paint that'll just come pouring out.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So a paintbrush comb is a really nice tool. You never want to use a wire brush on it because you'll destroy the tips, and those are shaped perfectly so that it absorbs paint well and holds it, and then when you touch the wall, it releases it and it flows out very nice. So once you're done, working this with the comb, you've used a little soap on it, then you want to grab it between the palms of your hands and start spinning it, and that's going to help dry it. And then you want to shape the bristles with your hand, and then I always like to put it back into the package. What they call this is the keeper, and then hang it up for storage, and you're going to get a lot of life out of this paintbrush.
So how about for drying? You just spin it in?
If you spin it with your hands, it's amazing. You can get it almost dry. Some painters will use paper towels, lay in a paper towel, and that's a great idea too. And then I would just look at get a quality brush and look at the packaging. That package should be heavy duty. It should be slightly tapered. It's going to hold the bristles in shape. The better keepers have a Velcro fastener or a loop fastener or a snap, and that's going to hold it in place.
So that process we just went through, that's only for latex paint.
Right, yes. I didn't say that?
Nope.
I should have said that. That's the process for latex paint.
All right, what if you have oil-based paint?
So if you're painting with oil, primarily you're using paint thinner or mineral spirits to clean it, but I would always look at the can and see what type of solvent they want you to clean your brushes with. Between paint thinner and mineral spirits, paint thinner is going to cost less, but it's a little stinkier. Mineral spirits is more refined, it has less smell, and both of these are very toxic, so we want to use this in a well-ventilated area. I think a great technique is using 2 or 3 glass canning jars, and you put just enough solvent in each one that's going to cover the bristles. In that first glass jar, you're going to start dipping your brush and pressing it against the side to remove as much paint as possible. And when it looks pretty clean, now you're going to go into the next jar that has clean solvent in it, and you're going to be using a paintbrush comb and dipping and combing until it looks clean. You can also go into the third one if you want to be fanatical. But then once your brush is clean, you're going to smooth it out with your hands, and you're going to put it into the package so that the bristles stay in good shape. I like to hang them up. And then what you're going to do is you're going to put the tops on this, and you're going to let all the paint...
So these are the jars?
So the glass jars, put the lids on, because it has a toxic fumes, and in fact, it's considered hazardous waste. So we don't want to be pouring this down the drain, and then all of those solids are going to settle off, and then we'll be able to pour off the solvent, so the mineral spirits, let's say, back into our container, or we can consolidate it all into one of these glass jars and reuse this over and over.
So what can you do with mineral spirits or paint thinner when you want to dispose of it?
So we talked about before that website, Earth 911. So it's EARTH and then the numbers 911.com. They have a zip code finder. You put your zip code into that, and they'll give you all of the places close to you where you can take this, and they will recycle it for you.
Let's talk about roller covers.
So like paintbrushes, you have natural, synthetic, and then a natural synthetic blend. You can get foam roller covers, which I'm not a big fan of for doing walls because I've found that it tends to leave, hundreds and hundreds of tiny little bubbles.
Almost like thousands of bubbles.
Thousands of bubbles if you paint a wall.
So you're talking about like the big, aren't they normally yellow?
Yeah, a couple. Some have like the gray. But what's good are the foam covers for trim.
Right.
I found those to be very effective.
Well, we just did a project here with the Sherwin-Williams sketch pad.
Oh, right. Yeah. So if you go to our Fix It Home Improvement channel on YouTube, we use the Sherwin-Williams dry erase board paint. So it dries completely clear.
So you paint this over an already painted wall.
And it's a two-part paint, so it's almost like an epoxy paint that dries clear, so it's wild. And once it cures for a week, you can use a dry erase marker on it, and then just wipe it off. What?
So my point was that...
I got all excited.
I know, but they sent a foam roller cover with it.
Yeah, and that actually did a very good job. So for that two-part paint, it rolled out beautiful, and the finish was perfect. Now, in a traditional roller cover, the natural ones, which are great for oil paint, you have mohair, which actually comes from the Angora goat.
Oh, you showed me a picture of it. It looks like it's got a perm on its face.
Real cool, like wavy beard too, man. You got to look that up on Google, the Angora goat. And that Angora, the wool is used for... Are you going to
spell it?
Angora, Angora. And they use their fur for clothes, carpeting, and roller covers. And it's really a smooth, strong fabric, and it picks up a lot of paint. And what's nice about it, it's very unique. It really releases it smoothly on the wall when you use it. The negative thing about Angora, though, on some of the covers is they can shed some of the fibers. So they really want you to use a lint roller on it first, or take some painter's tape and you wrap it up and then pull the paint off, and that sheds those excess fibers. And then the coolest natural roller cover you can get is Merino Wool.
Oh, brother.
And if you ever...
We all know about Merino Wool.
If you want the best long underwear on the planet, you get Merino Wool long underwear. And
hey, did I tell you that it was an answer on Jeopardy?
What, Merino Wool?
Yeah.
Oh, be like the one thing I could answer.
Yeah, I'm like, nailed it.
So this is one of the most ancient breeds of sheep, and which they started in Portugal, used for sweaters and socks, athletic clothing, because of its ability to wick moisture. And it picks up and releases more paint than any other type of roller cover. So if you're doing anything with oils, it's just it's a great product to get. Now for latex-based paints, you can use synthetic roller covers. What's interesting is I looked at a lot of packaging, and many of them don't list the material on it. So you're looking for something that says water or latex-based paint.
So you can't use these on oil-based?
Well, some of them you can, which is interesting. So like a pure polyester roller cover can be used for latex, oil, varnish, lacquer, and shellac. You have a nylon polyester blend, which is very versatile, and depending on the combination, the amount of nylon or polyester, it's good for different types of paint. So it's really almost looking at the packaging to see what's recommended. And then they also have blended covers. So this is a combination of natural and synthetic fibers. Again, if you're looking at the little more expensive roller covers, you're going to get the best pickup of paint, and it's going to release it the smoothest on the wall.
Mm-hmm. Talking about the packaging for roller covers, what is nap?
So your nap length, that's the fibers itself, so they call the material the nap. And you have some manufacturers, depends on the company, they're either going to say smooth, semi-smooth, semi-rough, or they're going to have...
Some say rough.
And rough?
Yeah. Extra rough.
But you're looking for usually a length. So 1/4 inch thick to 3/16 is very smooth. So this is really good for, let's say, metal doors or cabinet doors that you want a silky smooth finish. For trim work, interior doors, you can use a smaller nap or something that's called smooth. Probably the most popular size for doing drywall and walls is semi-smooth, anywhere from 3/8 inch to 1/2 inch, and I think 3/8 is probably the most versatile. And then 3/4 to 1 inch, so semi-rough with most manufacturers, is good for stucco, for wood, acoustical tile. Like with that one project we did at one of the hardware stores, we had all that acoustical tile that was discolored, so we brought it all down, and we used a real thick nap like this. 3/4 to 1 inch is good for sheds, for decks. And then when you get to 1.25 inch and bigger, I mean, these are monster roller covers.
Right.
These are rough. This is what you'd be using for concrete block or brick or like a rough-hewn fence.
So all of these, it's smooth, semi-smooth. This is the surface that you're painting.
Correct. This is the finish you want. So like a 3/8 roller. So if you're doing typical painting around the house, you're rolling your walls and your ceilings, you want what's called an orange peel effect. So when you roll with a 3/8 to 1/2 inch roller cover, that nap isn't going to give a perfectly smooth finish. It's going to give a slight wave to it. And that subtle little wave, almost like the surface of an orange peel, what it does is if you don't have perfect walls, which most homes don't,
Right.
it just diffuses the light enough to where it dampens the imperfections on your wall. It'll make your wall look much better, especially if you're using a satin finish paint.
Right.
It's going to give it just a beautiful look.
So before you purchase your roller cover, you really need to think about what you're painting.
What the surface is, yeah.
Because just because you have a bunch in your paint drawer or whatever in your supply closet,
Right, match the product to the project, yeah.
because like when I bought my condo, I bought a bunch of the semi-smooth roller covers, started painting the walls, and then we were going to do the ceiling, and I have a popcorn ceiling here, and
Yeah,
it's
like
terrible.
It's like popcorn textured kind of blend.
Right, yeah.
And so we went up to a 3/4 inch nap, and what that longer nap does is it wraps itself around all these odd shapes,
Right.
and it just does a very nice job of covering it. I have a few tips for roller covers.
Okay.
So I would buy a quality roller cover. You're going to have less shedding. You're going to be able to use this for multiple projects. You're going to be able to clean it off really well, use it over and over. You're going to get much better results. You're looking for a roller cover with a plastic core. Some of the cheapies still have cardboard centers. Boy, I used to use those when we first started investing. You'd use them and they'd start unrolling. The inner core would start to...
Yeah, beware of roller covers that come in a package because, I mean, they're going to leave the fuzz behind on the wall. They're going to shed into your
it's
paint.
weird. It's weird. Cheap ones are
And
not...
it's the same thing with the, packages with the paintbrushes, too.
Right. I would always look for, I prefer the beveled edges. So on the ends of the roller cover, you can see how it's cut at a little bit of a bevel, and that helps eliminate roller marks. And then it also allows you to tuck into the corners easier. So if you paint a line when you're cutting in your corners and edges of your wall and ceiling, this allows you to go into that much easier. And then whenever you're working into a corner, on the roller frame itself, you have the metal bracket on the side, and then the other side is open where you slide the roller cover on. You want that opened end always towards the corner so that you don't accidentally scrape the metal bar on it.
Does the bevel edge help with roller cover sliding off the roller frame?
I've had that problem. It's usually the cage itself, how good the quality of the cage is to keep it from sliding off, that I've found.
That's annoying. You're painting the wall, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute.
Right. Well, I used to buy the cheap ones, and I think it's the direction you push it too. So if you're always kind of working towards the open end, it kind of keeps it on. And then keep a wet edge. You never want to stop in the middle of a wall and take a break because you will see that line. Once it dries, it's amazing if you try to paint over it. Like some people, like when we first started, like we'd have these guys house sitting for us when we started investing in real estate, and sometimes we were leaving, like we would take a paintbrush and leave like notes on the wall, and then the next day we'd try to cover it up, and sometimes those notes, I think those notes are still in a few of those houses.
Well, one time my dad was painting the small bedroom at my parents' house, and he had stopped right above the door.
Right.
And so there's just a little bit left, and he's just like, I'm done for the night. I'll come back and do it the next day. And then he did it the next day, and it was like a completely different color.
It's weird, yeah.
Than the rest of the room.
Yeah, the pigments and the solids, move out of the paint different. The way you mix it's different. Yeah, when you're working, either finish it or finish into a corner and be done with that wall. And then, one of the tips, I would just go have a 2 foot by 4 foot area. So let's say we have an 8 foot ceiling. You're going to go 2 feet wide, and you'll do the top 4 feet and paint that area. Dip your roller cover and then paint below it in a 2 foot by 4 foot section. And then you're going to go all the way from the floor to the ceiling and blend that, and then move on to the next section. And you're just keeping a wet edge, blending all this together. And then these new...
If you don't do this correctly, you will see the roller...
Yeah, terrible. It'll look bad. You'll be dissatisfied with it. And these new paints, they dry quicker, they're thicker, so you really have to be conscious of that. And then I would say one trick is use a 5-gallon bucket with a paint grid. So this is the stiff mesh screen that you can put into a 5-gallon bucket. And let's say we're doing an average size room, 10 by 15. You're probably going to use about 2 gallons of paint for that. And so to make sure the color is all blended, you would mix your 2 gallons of paint together in a 5-gallon bucket. You'd put this paint grid in it, and then you'd paint right out of the bucket. You're rolling right against this grid, rather than a tray where you're constantly refilling and you constantly have to move it. You know, you have more chance of dripping and spilling. And then sometimes you don't have a uniform color, just like you said. So it's nice to mix everything together. And we just picked up this new product. It's called Rolla Bucket.
Yep.
And so we're going to be testing this. We'll be showing this off on our YouTube channel. But it's a 6-gallon bucket on wheels, and it has a paint grid in it. So I'm very interested to see how well that works. Another tip that professional painters have is to condition a new roller cover.
What does that mean?
So if you have latex paints, what they're saying is you want to run your roller cover underneath water and let it absorb some water, like in a wash tub or outside. You're going to put the roller cover on your roller frame and then start spinning it like crazy with your hand. Use your hand to rub off any excess water, and you just want it to kind of be ready to absorb the paint, because it's wild. When you use a new roller cover and you start to roll it on a wall, it comes out completely different, because
it really makes a weird sound too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just not saturated yet, so sometimes it's hard to get it started. So that's one thing they recommend, to kind of break in a roller cover.
I've never heard of that.
And then if you're using oil paints, they're saying use whatever solvent is recommended. So, probably paint thinner or mineral spirits in most cases. But for that, make sure you're reading the paint label to see what solvent to use.
Do you have any tips on cleaning roller covers?
So if you're cleaning a roller cover with latex paint, I would scrape off all the excess paint. And I really like these 5-in-1 tools, so you can get this at any hardware store. It looks like a scraper with a little U shape cut out of the side of the scraper. And that U shape you can use pressing against the length of the roller cover and turning it. You're going to scrape off the large amount of paint, and you can scrape this into the bucket or the tray. And then what's cool about this 5-in-1 tool is it has, the scraper, the edge of it, so you can use it like a scraper. That end has 2 tips. One side is designed almost like a screwdriver, so that you can pry open your paint cans. The other side has a really sharp tip, so you can gouge out cracks in drywall and kind of clean them up. And then you've got the scraper area, and then the end of it, the heel of it, you can knock in and indent nails that are popping up out of drywall. So it does 5 different things. And
so I've always known it to be just for cleaning the roller covers, and didn't know that it did all those other
4
things.
more fabulous things.
So this will be hanging up by the paint brushes?
Right, or sometimes they'll have them by the compound knives.
Right.
Really depends on the hardware store. But you're going to take your roller cover now, you've scraped off the excess into the tray, let's say, and you're going to go to a wash tub. You're going to run this under water, and you're going to use the tool or your hand to squeeze out all the paint. I would then take that roller cover and slide it halfway down the frame. And now you can use the palm of your hand against the cage and start spinning this underneath the water. And this will really help loosen up any paint that's sticking to it. Then I would take a little bit of liquid soap and work it in really good with my hand, and then just keep rinsing. You can use that 5-in-1 tool and just keep working it till it's completely dry. Depending on the type of roller cover you have, if you don't have a beveled style, so the edges aren't beveled, you don't want to lay that on its edge, because you're going to ruin the end of that. But if you have a beveled style, and that's another reason I like it, is you can clean it, dry it completely. You can use paper towels like your dad. You can use this tool to get the excess, kind of shake it. If it's beveled, set it on its edge. You don't want to lay it on the whole length of the nap, because you'll destroy the nap. And let it dry. If you have a standard roller cover without the beveled edges, one of the tips is to run it through a piece of string and then make a loop and hang it up to allow it to dry so it's not touching anything.
That's funny.
And then clean your roller cage. Make sure that you don't have dried paint on it, because when you're rolling a wall, it flakes off and it'll get on your wall, so keep it clean.
So it's funny, I've always cleaned all my paintbrushes.
Right.
And I mean, I've had the same paintbrushes forever.
Sure.
I've never cleaned a roller cover.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, if you buy a quality roller cover, I mean, they're worth keeping. They really last. They do a nice job. You get a feel for that roller cover and how it works. For oil-based paint, you would want to pour a little solvent into a paint tray liner. So I would get, so you're going to scrape off the excess, let's say, with your 5-in-1 tool, and then whatever solvent is recommended, let's say paint thinner, you're going to pour a little into a tray liner or a tray, and then you're going to work it in back and forth, use the 5-in-1 tool. Then I would have one of those glass canning jars, pour that dirty solvent into that glass jar, and then pour some clean solvent in there, and do this a couple times until your roller cover is completely clean, and then you can cap off that solvent. We talked about Earth 911 if you need to dispose of it. That would be the basics on keeping your roller covers clean.
Two of the top-rated paintbrushes and roller cover companies are Purdy and Wooster. You can get them at any hardware store.
Yeah, real easy to find. Highly rated. And then I was on a couple of paint forums, and a couple of the painters were saying that they really like the Corona paintbrushes, and that's Corona.
And they like drinking the beer afterwards?
Yes, it was a 2-in-1 thing.
Brand loyalty. Do you have anything else to add?
I would say if you're doing projects with latex and oil-based paint, I would have different brushes. So I'd keep one brush just for my latex projects and one for my oil projects. And if it were me, I would really try to stick to using all latex paint inside and outside, whereas in the past the oil paints were rough and tough and stand up to weather outside.
Well, they're supposed to be more durable.
Right, but the new formulas, they're just doing a fantastic job with latex, much better for the environment, much easier to work with. And then if you're getting ready to set up your painting or your toolbox and getting ready, in a new home, let's say, I would start with probably a real good quality 2.5-inch angled or straight brush, and I would make it a synthetic blend, like a polyester nylon blend. And then I would have one good quality 3/8-inch roller cover, a synthetic blend also. And then, depending on the project, then I would add to that. So now I'm using this 2.5-inch brush for all my cutting on walls and ceilings for trim projects around the house. But then if I'm going to be painting a lot of window trim and small wood, I would then pick up a 1-inch brush. If I'm doing a shed project or painting outside, then I'd get a 3-inch brush. So I would start with a 2.5 and then add to that. And then the same with the roller cover. I would also have a 5-in-1 painting tool in my toolbox and a paintbrush comb, and I think you're set.
If you're a new homeowner, I would definitely pick up one of those paintbrush covers. So you're able to, if you're painting a bunch of rooms, if you're taking a break, you put your paintbrush in there. It seals it so it keeps the paintbrush wet and doesn't ruin it.
Yeah, it's handy because especially if you don't keep the keeper, the packaging to your paintbrush, this is something that you're not going to throw away.
Right, but it's nice too when you're done painting, you've cleaned up your paintbrush, you can store it in this too, and it keeps the shape of the paintbrush.
Exactly. Yep.
Let's wrap this up.
You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Stitcher or your favorite podcast app.
And if you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you could subscribe there as well.
We just had the book cover finished for our home improvement book. It looks pretty cool. So you've got that to look forward to. The Fix It Home Improvement Solutions to Your Projects book.
It's a much better title than that. So if they'd like to contact us, where can they do that?
You can contact us at our email, fixitpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.